Hey everyone. So yeah, today I want to show a little bit more around our S3 compatible and what we can do from an object storage point of view. In particular, I've been working quite closely with Cloudian, so an on-premises S3 repository. So I just want to touch on the three real key points that we can achieve when leveraging object storage, and in particular highlight some of the features that Cloudian have brought to that. So ultimately, what we're going to do first is in Veeam Backup and Replication, we're going to show that S3 compatible. So you can see here I've already added a couple of S3 compatible buckets from the Cloudian, as well as this local performance tier. So first of all, so the three things that I want to show really are the immutable storage for image-based backups. I want to show the ability to offload older file versions from a NAS perspective. You might have seen that in the previous NAS series, but just reiterate that, and then also jump over to Office 365 and show how we can leverage object storage on that front as well. So if we first of all look at the immutable object storage, so all we did was went through that wizard that I first showed, and then we're going to give it a name. We're going to choose our service point. So in particular, this Cloudian doesn't live in my environment. This is a remote copy. So this really opens up the door for service providers as well. And there's a webinar that I'm going to do next week, just before Veeam on, that touches on this in a little bit more detail. So yeah, this service point, or this actual Cloudian array or object storage offering, is actually in a different location, and this is presented over the internet to me that I can then consume and leverage that for my backups to be stored on. So again, we get all of the access credentials from that, and then we go into here and we choose, or we see what what buckets and what folders are available. So here I've chosen a bucket called Veeam Backup 1, and I've created a folder called capacity tier. We can do that, limiting the object storage consumption to X amount of terabytes, and this is the key part to this, image-based backups. Now, because Cloudian support the object lock API for S3, we can take advantage here and use this immutable option that we have in place. So make recent backups immutable for X amount of days. If we go to next, that's going to finish that. And then what I've then done is I've created a scale-out backup repository using that performance tier as well as the object storage, and we'll quickly, when this is finished, we'll quickly run through what that looks like, gives you the summary of that. So yeah, then I've created this. So I mentioned, so this Cloudian demo local performance tier is actually just a bit of storage on this actual VBR server. So if we go into that and we go properties, again we give it a name. We choose that performance tier, so local storage for fast recovery. We then choose the placement policy, and then we get to the capacity tier, which is where we can leverage that object storage. Now, we've got two options here, and maybe this is another topic for another video, but we can either move the backups to object storage, so when they filter out of a retention period for that performance tier, they get tiered into the capacity tier, or as soon as they land in the performance tier, they can then be copied to object storage, giving you an offsite copy of that backup straight away. On this same window, we can, on this same option of the wizard, we can add obviously the capacity tier or the object storage. We can choose a window in which when we want this to happen. We can also encrypt that data. Obviously, if this is going out of band, out of your four walls, then we should consider encrypting that data. You don't want anyone just getting hold of that. So that's all I've got set. And then if I jump over to one of our image-based backups, I've got a few machines being sent to the performance tier first as a copy, and then being copied as part of that policy up into object storage. So choose your virtual machines, proxies, etc. Choose that scale out backup repository that I just went through as our backup repository, and how many retention points do we want to keep, restore points do we want to keep, guest processing, etc. Pretty simple stuff. Then if we go over to here, you're going to see under disks, you're going to see that we've got the local copy, so I've got 8 restore points. But if we go down to object storage, you're going to see these. So you're going to see those machines, and these are copies of that backup that are now residing on object storage. Now, obviously that's great, and we can do things like restoring from them. Again, this is probably better for another time. Obviously the constraints are there as well in terms of time to get that data back. You're very much reliant on your connectivity to that system, to that storage. If it's on premises, then it obviously reduces that time to get things back and running. But all of our instant VM recovery, disk recovery, all of the application item and etc. is all still applicable there, and we can even restore that to EC2 or Microsoft Azure as well. But what we want to show is actually a threat in regards to, well, why is immutability important? So immutability obviously stops malicious activity from happening, and kind of secures or puts the padlock on to stop anyone from getting in and manipulating that file. That's a immutable backup that should not be tampered with. So in theory, I should be able to come in here and I should be able to not delete this backup from that object storage, because we flagged the immutability of that. So what this should do, and this is simulating an insider attack, an insider threat, we've basically said we want to remove that backup, and you can see there, lucky for live demos, is that it's failed to delete because it's been marked immutable until the 15th of July. So because of that 30-day retention, it's been marked immutable, and that's really why and how we've integrated with that Object Lock API, and in particular Cloudian have brought that to market as well as others. It's not just Cloudian; it's just because I've been working with them more recently. But yeah, this simulates that those backups that are stored in that object storage are now protected from any insider malicious activity, but ultimately they cannot be modified, they cannot be deleted either. Okay, so the second one that I wanted to touch on was back into backup repositories, and if I jump down into the second object storage, you'll notice here I've gone through very much the same settings, but under the bucket I've chosen a different bucket and I've had different settings. In particular, I don't have make recent backups immutable for X amount of days, and the reason why is because I want to use this for our NAS backup. So again, now if I run back to backup jobs, and you'll see I've got a job that's configured. Ignore the warnings, it's because of space, not for anything else. So I've chosen my shares. I now have this storage. So under backup repository, this is where we're going to keep a short-term retention of those file versions for the last, in this case, 1 day. And then after that, the versions that keep changing are going to land out onto this archive repository. And in particular, that Cloudian object storage that I just mentioned. Now, in the NAS video, but I'll touch on it again here, is that we can choose what files we actually archive or what we exclude from the backup. So let's say, for example, that up here for the short-term retention, we actually want to exclude particular file types, maybe MP3s, and everything else we're going to keep for that 1 day retention. Now, when we get to archive, and in particular when we're sending this to object storage, it may be that, okay, we don't want to send all of our MP3s, which we haven't got a backup of anyway, but we also don't want to send MP4s or ISOs. So we can come in here and we can exclude those file types or those particular file types from that longer term retention as well, and be quite granular on what we keep and how long we keep it for. And pretty much that's how we leverage object storage from a NAS backup point of view. Now again, if we take a look at our restore for NAS, so restore individual files and folders. Let's find our Cloudian NAS backup. Let's choose this one because I know it's got things that have changed. And what this is going to do is open that Explorer type window that allows us to look into, to begin with, it's going to show us the last backup, the last NAS backup available. But there's a few options in here that enable us to look at all of our backups, so combined, so that you can see all of the different versions and choose which version you want to recover back to. Okay, so this is taking the latest restore point. If we come up the top here to all time, then you'll start to see things like this box cutter. This is just another little project that I've got going on. But you can see that there's 5 different versions of this. So if I go restore now and I overwrite, I've now got an option to choose which one I want to take. So you can see that backup because I'm keeping 1 day on local short-term retention. But then I'm keeping these other, what are they, 4? I'm keeping those on the archive. So these are actually in the object storage. So if I wanted to recover something from the archive, then we can absolutely do that. Obviously, those same constraints may or may not be applicable here, but this is just showing you that you can get back to particular versions of those files for recovery. Okay, so let's quickly jump over to Office 365 and just show you another scenario here. So let's reconnect. And again, so in version 4 of Veeam Backup for Office 365, this gave us the ability to offload our backups, or the bulk of our backups, to object storage. So I'm not going to go into too much detail around that, but ultimately we come in here, and again, a very similar looking screen. In fact, I won't do that. I'll right click on this one. But this gives us the option to choose those same 4 options that we had before in Veeam Backup and Replication. So we have S3 compatible, we have Microsoft Azure Blob Storage, AWS S3, as well as IBM Cloud Storage. So again, we run through, we give it a name, we choose those 4, or one of the 4 that we have. So in particular, from a Cloudian point of view, we choose S3 compatible. Again, we give it the service point. Notice how this looks very, very similar to what we've already seen in Veeam Backup and Replication. Validate that. Now we're going to choose another bucket, or it could be the same bucket and then just choose a different folder within that bucket. So in this instance, I'm using something called a folder called VBO 365. Under here, this is again that limit of the consumption of that storage. We can set that, and that's it. That's all we need to do. But now we need to take that object storage and we need to leverage that in our backup repository. So again, let's come in here. I've created one called Cloudian Demo, just for ease of our demos. And then we need somewhere locally that we're going to store the cache, so that we're going to be able to store it locally before offloading that. And to be honest, this is a tiny amount of data that we're storing locally. So we choose that. Then we want to offload backup data to object storage in this particular instance. Now you don't have to. This is a complete choice. You can see there's a tick box there. And then also, again, you've got the ability to encrypt that data before you upload that to, or that's being uploaded to object storage. Then you've got the retention policy, and I did go through this in another video and a blog post, is that these 2 different retention periods are 2 different things, and it depends whether you're an existing Veeam customer where you're looking at retention policy for everything, the Veeam Backup and Replication retention policy, so we're going to back up everything on day 1, and then we're going to keep it for the retention that you define, or whether you actually look at inside of Microsoft Office 365 and you look at the inbox. Well, how long are we going to keep that for? It's not going to back up everything. So that's a consideration to take. And this was, again, a new addition in a few recent versions of Veeam Backup for Office 365. And then we've got our job. So we come in here and pretty simple stuff. Name again, we're going to choose who we back up or what we back up. Then we choose the backup repository that we want it to back up to. When do you want it to run? Save. Okay, so to put that into perspective, so everything's going to object storage there. You saw successful jobs, hopefully, that everything went off to what we need it to be. So just to finish on a bit of a demo, is if I look at that OneDrive, and if I open one of these, you can see that everything's good in terms of readable, pictures are all visible, etc. So if I then was to, and obviously this is our live OneDrive. So this is presented out of Microsoft Office 365 and I'm connected using OneDrive on this local machine. If I then go and run this ransomware attack, because it's still applicable, this is going to encrypt all of those files. You'll see all of the modified date automatically change. So if I now go and try and open this file, and you see there as well, maybe it was too quick, but you saw there that it's synced. So this synced back up into Office 365. So now we have no way of getting that data back unless we've got a good backup. So if I jump back into here, you saw that now the text on there was completely unreadable. So if I go into here, we've got our Explorer for OneDrive. So what this is going to do is going to mount that backup that we have. Again, this is in object storage. Only the cache is local. If I click on here, then you're going to see all of those items that you saw in my OneDrive. Now we could be granular and we can restore everything or keep everything. We can copy the OneDrive, etc. But in this instance, I just want to send everything back to how it was previously, if I can remember the password. Okay, so that started enumerating what we need. So you see all these modified dates that we have. So obviously that was the ransomware. So 6:23 a.m. was when that ransomware attack took place, and you can start to now see. So we're restoring directly into OneDrive, not to this OneDrive client, if you will, just for the purpose of the demo that I'm using this. So and then what's happening is this desktop is now syncing back from OneDrive. So you can pretty much see there that 32 from 38 are complete. And I think already, to be honest, if I was to open this file, then we should be back in business. Everything's back up and running. Now you could go and mess around with versions of that within OneDrive. I think that kind of articulates the ease of what that Veeam Explorer for OneDrive looks like, but also how quick that came back from object storage as well. I just wanted to highlight that's another, not only that's a feature from Veeam Backup for Office 365, but also the power of being able to offload that to object storage. And with that, I'll catch you on the next one. Cheers, guys.